Hey, this is Shaheen from Webupon, and this is episode number 9 of ChalkTalk Thursday. Today I wanted to cover a pretty basic SEO task, which is how to generate a sitemap. I'm going to talk about a few different ways that you can do this, which is why we're on the computer, and I am the man in the corner over here waving at your screen. So, the first thing that I'll say is there's actually a bunch of ways that this happens. I'm going to cover how to do so with a WordPress plugin because that's very, very common. I'm going to talk about how you can use Yoast and how to properly calibrate it and all that good stuff. I'm going to talk about this free tool right here, which is actually quite good and very, very useful for smaller sites. And I'm also going to talk about how to use Screaming Frog, which is what I use the majority of times, especially when I'm dealing with a bigger e-com site. So let's dive in. The first tool I will mention is sitemapscom. This is really handy and actually, this works perfectly fine for most small sites. Free tool, very capable from what I'm seeing. So you just hop over to xml-sitemaps.com, plug in the URL that you want to actually crawl through, and then it'll do a little bit crawl for you and just parse through it. And for smaller sites, it's free. And of course, they have pro plans. So check those out if that's of interest to you. But if you just have a small site and you really quickly want to get a sitemap made, that's the way I'd proceed. If you're dealing with Shopify or BigCommerce and most other tools out there, they're actually going to have some kind of functionality that'll generate a sitemap for you. So you won't have to worry about this really. I like to do something like this though, just because it can often be useful to get a custom sitemap, especially when some installations are creating bloat. I'll talk about that a little more with WordPress. So inside of WordPress, there's a really, really handy plugin called Yoast SEO, very commonly used, very, very helpful as far as a few different services and just implementations go. If you want to get title tags and meta descriptions on a site, can be very, very handy to use Yoast SEO. And there's a lot of features here. They obviously want to sell you some stuff, but for the free plugin, you can actually get a lot of functionality out of it, and it can make implementation of SEO items extremely easy. So the one thing I'll note is if you go to this, find it in your dashboard where it'll just say SEO, and it'll have this little Y here. Click on General, and you'll see this screen, and there'll be a few different settings connected here, which you can check out. So you'll see something like this with a bunch of stuff on it. And then you want to go to search appearance, and this will have a bunch of different settings on it as well if you want to sort of mess around with this. I'll probably get into this real quick just because there is a little bit of overlap here. But the key thing is that when you're inside of this tool, you can click over to features, and then you can disable stuff. So if the readability analysis is annoying to you or Cornerstone, you don't need all the stuff they have in there. But anyways, click on this little question mark. It says you can see the XML sitemap, so they'll automatically generate one for you. This is what you want to plug in to Search Console. The one thing that Yoast does that's actually really nice is they split up your pages. So inside of Search Console, you'll have there's the index they're giving you, and then they're breaking that into the multiple page types. So you have posts, and then you have pages, and if you have custom post types or events, all this kind of stuff, they do a nice little job of chunking your sitemap. And then inside of Search Console, you can see what your index ratio is of each specific page type, which is really nice. So rather than seeing, I have 80 out of 100 pages indexed, you can see for my pages I have 9 out of 20, and I have 60 out of 100 for my posts, whatever it may be. And then oh, I don't actually have that many of my pages indexed. There's probably some kind of issue here. And then if you click down into this level, you'll basically see all the individual pages that Yoast is picking up on the back end. The other thing that you should keep in mind is if you hop back over to search appearance, there's the secondary tab right here is content types. Now, one thing that's very helpful about Yoast, especially when you're just hopping into the SEO world for the first time, jumping on your site, is they actually make it very easy to auto-generate title tags and meta descriptions. They give you these nice little cues, and then you can also go into your page and your posts and customize there as well, which is even better. But the key thing that's really cool is you can go into here, and if you just want to deactivate things that are unimportant, you can basically keep them out of the index in here. So if you say like, no, I don't want to see testimonials, that'll also basically block it out of the actual sitemap that they generate. So all this bulk that you get here from like your team members and your portfolio items and all the other stuff that can just happen as you have a WordPress installation, you can basically just throw that completely out of the sitemap, and that then just leaves the gold on Google's side, and that also lets you know, okay, if I don't have these 50 pages that really, really matter to me indexed, but I just have 30 of those, then that's a problem, rather than when you have a bunch of bloat that's going to hurt the small chunk of pages you really care about, and you're going to have really imprecise data as to what actually is getting indexed, and then you're not going to know what to optimize for. So this is probably the most common way that I see sitemaps being implemented on a WordPress installation. Shopify and BigCommerce will have different systems, but they do have some systems in there that you can use. And then, if you just have a smaller site, this is a really useful tool, sitemapscom. You can just download it and it's ready to roll. Very, very nice functionality. And the other cool thing before I hop off of this system is inside of Yoast, it's actually awesome because they keep this updated. So if you plug this into Search Console, which you absolutely should do, it'll do a pretty decent job of repinging the system, and as you're retesting the sitemap from the Search Console side, you'll be able to see these pages getting updated, and you don't have to do a lot of work. Now let's get to the big boy. So the final way that I'll cover is using Screaming Frog. So this is actually far and away like my favorite way to create a sitemap, and this is really good on a super large e-com store. Even when developers come to me and they're like, Shaheen, I already made a sitemap, or it's auto-generating and renewing all the time, blah, 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 I typically go straight into Screaming Frog and I make a sitemap from here, right? Now, I'm just going to plug my site in here, which is, pretty new and there's not a lot going on there. But the really useful thing about Screaming Frog is you can crawl through the site, and then once you have your total list of pages on the site, you can do an export, and then you can comb out and delete URLs that you don't want crawled because you think they're useless or there's just too much bloat. And it lets you be really, really refined about which URLs and which images, more interestingly, that you want to include in your sitemap. And so as far as pruning your sitemap for performance goes, this is very helpful, and also exactly what you want to be doing on a larger e-com store where you may have products that you need to be indexed, but you may have subcategory pages that you need to ignore, or you may have a ton of blog posts that are excellent linking out to some product pages, and you want to make sure that you have everything covered, but then you also have some weird archive folders and some legacy news content that your CEO wants you to keep on the site, but you don't really need because no one cares about it. So then that stuff, you can just throw that out and only crawl the URLs that really, really matter, that you care about, so that you actually are getting what's important inside of the search engine, right? So I'm just going to stop this real quick so I can show you what this pruning looks like. Basically, you go over here and, we'll just say like sitemap crawl, do a little export. We get our list of URLs, which is, where did I save that to? Very embarrassing. Oh, there it is, of course. So open that up, and then we're going to have a list of URLs that we want to work off of. And then basically what you can do, which is very, very nice, is you can just select or delete the ones you don't care about. So let's say these are the only pages that I really care about indexing on my site, which is obviously not true because there's so much more going on there, but we'll just take a little chunk here, and let's say that I have like 80 pages, but these are the only ones I really care about. I can copy that list of URLs, go back up to Screaming Frog, click on Mode, and then go to List, and I can paste in all the URLs that I just copied over. It'll dump those into the system. So go to Upload and then go to Paste, right? And it'll say 27 found. We might have 100,000 or something that we really care about out of 230 if you're working on a big e-com site, whatever it may be. So you go through there, and then it's only going to crawl that list of URLs. So one thing I'll note is the free version, this is the paid version of Screaming Frog. It looks exactly the same as the free version, but the paid version lets you do this list crawling functionality. I don't believe at the free version lets you do that. But the free version can generate a sitemap for you and will cover up to 500 URLs. So that should be more than sufficient for most people. And if you have any issue with it, again, you can just hop over here. You just can't do the really cool work of pruning your sitemap that you might want to do after hearing this video, right? So anyways, we crawl through our URL list that we really care about. Let's say it's, could be 10,000, could be 5,000. Right now we got 27 just for the sake of argument. And then you're going to hop over to the very, very top of the screen right over here, click on Sitemaps, and then click on XML sitemap. And this is the instruction and configuration for making a sitemap. Again, the system inside of Screaming Frog is just awesome. It deselects 300s and 400s and 500s by default. This can also be a really good test if you use the Screaming Frog tool to crawl a sitemap and you see a bunch of 400s. That lets you know that you're coming into a situation where the dev probably isn't very good at generating a sitemap. I had a situation recently where the devs insisted that they had a sitemap made and that it was great. Went to the site and found that basically the sitemap was only suggesting that Google index a very small percentage of all the products and categories on the site. It wasn't a thing where pruning had been done. It was just sort of negligence on their part. So anyways, you can specify, if you want to include PDFs in your sitemap, if that's a very important part of the experience. Otherwise, it's going to basically only get the 200s, which are the good pages, and you can make your choice from there. You can also check a server response date that you want, which is basically, you can set a last mod tag, which you can just set to the day that you do this. There's also priority. So this is also a really, really nice feature of Screaming Frog. Definitely more important on big sites, but as the crawl depth goes down, so you have, let's say, the home page, category pages, subcategory pages, subcategory, and then product and services, whatever may be down at the very bottom of your site. You can say priority 0 for basically priority 1, for the 0 depth, which is the home page, priority 2 for the actual, or 0.9 because it's on a point system, 0.9 for the categories, 0.8 for the subcategories, 0.7 for the sub, just go all the way down. So that's really, really slick. That can be very helpful on bigger sites, again, where you're dealing with how to actually manage the crawl budget, quote unquote, that's coming in from Google. And really it's just about making sure the right pages that are getting frequently updated that you really want to rank are getting indexed properly by Google. That's all that's really happening there. It's not like you're going to completely destroy yourself with a bad sitemap, although you can, cause some issues, but it's not going to be an instant death. There's other SEO things that are in place that should keep you from having any big failures if your sitemap isn't perfect. You can also check to include images. This is actually functionality I don't like as much in Screaming Frog. So keep in mind that they set this up to a certain number of inlinks. So this can be useful if you select to include relevant images with up to 2 inlinks. The dangerous part is logos and, let's say, credit card pictures for your payment portals, or the cart button will get indexed as images because they have tons of inlinks in them. So just be careful with this. And then hreflang, this can be very important on bigger international sites. But yeah, for the sort of end-all be-all of sitemap creation, you really, really want to go with Screaming Frog because it gives you all that functionality as far as crawling and pruning goes. And one more pro feature that I'll cover here is when you're in the list mode in Screaming Frog, there's actually an option to download a sitemap index. So this can be really helpful, again, just for as far as searching out and debugging any kind of mismatch. So you just give it a URL and then it'll download all the URLs based off of the sitemap that you're pointing it at, and it'll crawl both the sitemap index and a sitemap. Anyways, I hope that was helpful. I know that's super basic, but just good coverage, something that everyone should know. Again, great free tool on sitemapscom. If you have a WordPress site, I would absolutely just go with Yoast and go with their functionality as far as sitemap generation goes. Just make sure that you're pruning what's actually in the sitemap on the search appearances content page, and just make sure you're de-indexing the stuff that really doesn't matter, that bloat that WordPress is creating. And then if you have a bigger site and a bigger need, absolutely go with Screaming Frog. Still worth a shot if you have a site and you just want to check for errors, but this is really the best tool to go with if you have a massive site and you really want to prune and focus, and you want to sort of get tricky with how you're having Google index your site. I hope that was helpful.